Hello and good day. Our topic for today is general functions of credit. This topic in credit and collection basically covers the benefits provided by credit to the economy. Let us now start general functions of credit. In general, credit benefits the entire economy. In other words, that is the general function of credit. It gives economic benefit. The question is, if credit benefits the entire economy, in what way? That question will be answered as we go through the different economic benefits provided by credit. At this point, kailangan muna nating i-review yung production, marketing, distribution system. Actually, alam nyo na to, the production, marketing, distribution system kasi na-discuss na to during your marketing subject. Yang production, marketing, distribution system ay tinatawag din na distribution channels or channels of distribution. Of course, ang production, marketing, distribution system ay nagsisimula sa manufacturer. Of course, nagsisimula ang production, marketing, distribution system sa manufacturer kasi nga sila ang gumagawa ng goods. Sila ang nagmamanufacture ng products. Of course, yung manufacturer, itatransfer niya yung products sa wholesaler. After that, the wholesaler transfers the products to a retailer. And ultimately, the retailer transfers the products to the consumer. Of course, during your marketing subject, dinifferentiate nyo na kung ano ba ang consumer at customer. They are basically different. They are not the same. Kasi kapag sinabing consumer, siya yung end user. Do not forget this production, marketing, distribution system because we can use this to better explain the different economic benefits provided by credit. Let us now proceed to the first economic benefit of credit. The first economic benefit refers to the manufacturing side. The larger the enterprise, the more economies of scale. Kapag sinabing economies of scale, these are cost reductions that occur when an organization is large or increases production. In other words, habang palaki ng palaki ang enterprise o habang pataas ng pataas ang kanilang production, nagkakaroon sila ng cost reductions. Ang tanong, paano nagkakaroon ng cost reductions habang pataas ng pataas ang kanilang production? Actually, this concept of economies of scale could be best illustrated by using as examples fixed costs and variable costs. In order for you to better understand the economies of scale, kailangan nyo munang malaman ang fixed costs at variable costs. Fixed costs are business expenses that do not vary in relation to production. This means whether tumaas ang production o bumaba ang production, hindi nagbabago ang fixed cost. These costs remain the same regardless of production. Whether there is an increase in units produced or decrease in units produced, these costs are constant. That's why tinawag na fixed costs. Kasi from the word itself, fixed, ang ibig sabihin niyan, constant. It doesn't change. An example of a fixed cost is rent. Even if the production in terms of quantity or number of units produced, the rent remains the same or fixed. For example, whether ang produce ng company ay 1 unit or 10,000 units, hindi nagbabago ang rent. But take note, this is of course up to a relevant range. Gaya ng example ko kanina, yung range is from 1 unit to 10,000 units. Within that relevant range, hindi nagbabago ang rent. But if the factory becomes crowded or the equipment is already at its maximum production level, requiring a new equipment and thus new rental space, then the fixed costs change. Ang relevant range natin kanina is from 1 unit to 10,000 units. And within that relevant range, hindi nagbabago ang rent. But in case nakapag-produce sila ng 20,000 units, yung 20,000 units hindi na siya within that relevant range. And because it is not already within the relevant range, magbabago ngayon ang fixed costs. Of course, common sense, kung normally 1 unit to 10,000 units ang pinoproduce ng isang company, at in case nakapag-produce sila ng 20,000 units, then magkakaroon sila ng new rental space. At sa pagkakaroon ng new rental space, then they will pay additional costs. That's why the rent changes if it is not within the relevant range. Variable costs vary directly with production. This means if there is an increase in production, variable costs also increase. If there is a decrease in production, variable costs also decrease. Examples of variable costs are raw materials and direct labor that are directly attributable to a finished product. Let's say ang finished product ay ballpen. Of course, merong cost of raw materials dyan at cost of direct labor. Habang padami ng padami yung pinuproduce na ballpen, pataas din ng pataas ang cost ng raw materials at direct labor. If a company's fixed cost per month is 100,000 pesos and its variable cost is 10 pesos per unit of production, the cost of production per unit will be decreasing as the production output increases. Para mas lalo nyo itong maintindihan, i-illustrate natin. Let's say ang production in units ay 10,000 units, 20,000 units, 30,000 units, at 50,000 units. Take note, within the relevant range ang units dito. Therefore, kung within the relevant range ang mga units dito, yung fixed cost hindi magbabago at yung variable cost magbabago. Yung fixed cost na 100,000 pesos, regardless of production, hindi yan magbabago. Therefore, for 10,000 units, ang fixed cost ay 100,000 pesos. For 20,000 units, ang fixed cost ay 100,000 pesos. For 30,000 units, ang fixed cost ay 100,000 pesos. At for 50,000 units, ang fixed cost ay 100,000 pesos. Again, Regardless of production, the fixed costs remain the same. Next, variable cost. Ang variable cost, as I said earlier, these are costs that vary directly with production. Kapag tataas ang production, tataas din ang variable cost. Kung magdi-decrease ang production, magdi-decrease din ang variable cost. Para ma-compute yung variable cost, i-multiply natin yung variable cost per unit na 10 pesos sa number of units. For 10,000 units, ang variable cost ay 100,000 pesos. Paano na-compute? 10,000 units times 10 pesos. For 20,000 units, ang variable cost ay 200,000 pesos. That is 20,000 units times 10 pesos. For 30,000 units, ang variable cost ay 300,000 pesos. That is 30,000 units times 10 pesos. For 50,000 units, ang variable cost ay 500,000 pesos. Paano yan na-compute? 50,000 units times 10 pesos. As you can see, habang pataas ng pataas yung production, pataas din ng pataas yung variable cost. Next, total costs. Ang total cost, yan yung sum ng fixed cost at variable cost. To get the total cost, i-add natin yung fixed cost at variable cost. 100,000 pesos plus 100,000 pesos, that is equal to 200,000 pesos. 100,000 pesos plus 200,000 pesos, that is equal to 300,000 pesos. 100,000 pesos plus 300,000 pesos, that is equal to 400,000 pesos. And 100,000 pesos plus 500,000 pesos, that is equal to 600,000 pesos. Next, i-compute naman natin yung cost per unit. Para ma-compute yung cost per unit, total costs divided by production in units. 200,000 pesos divided by 10,000 units, that is equal to 20 pesos per unit. 300,000 pesos divided by 20,000 units, that is equal to 15 pesos per unit. 400,000 pesos divided by 30,000 units, that is equal to 13.33 pesos per unit. 600,000 pesos divided by 50,000 units, that is equal to 12 pesos per unit. As you can see, the total cost per unit dropped from 20 pesos at the production level of 10,000 units to only 12 pesos at 50,000 units of production. At yan na yung sinasabi nating economies of scale. These are cost reductions that occur when an organization is large or increases production. As the production in units increases, the cost per unit decreases. Sa 10,000 units na produce, ang cost per unit ay 20 pesos per unit. Sa 50,000 units na na-produce, ang cost per unit ay 12 pesos per unit. Yan yung sinasabi natin na cost reductions. And that is basically The first economic benefit of credit. The larger the enterprise, the more economies of scale. Let us now proceed to the second economic benefit of credit. The second benefit that credit brings to the economy is the expansion of the purchasing power of the consumers. In other words, the second economic benefit of credit is that it increases the purchasing power of the consumers. This time, to illustrate, babaliktarin natin yung production, marketing, distribution system kanina. Di ba kanina, it starts from manufacturer up to consumer. Ngayon naman, mag-i-start tayo from consumer up to manufacturer. When the purchasing power of the consumers is expanded, this increases demand and actual consumption, which in turn will require higher production. Kung tataas yung purchasing power ng consumers, ang ibig sabihin nun, mas marami silang mabibili. Tataas yung demand and actual consumption ng products. At kung tataas yung demand and actual consumption ng products, ang magiging result nito, higher production. That's why dito sa ating illustration, nag-start tayo from consumer up to manufacturer. The credit provided expands consumer demand. Si retailer magpapautang kay consumer. At dahil magpapautang si retailer kay consumer, tataas ang consumer demand. Ganon din kay wholesaler. Kung magbibigay ng credit si wholesaler kay retailer, tataas yung demand ni retailer. Mas maraming bibilhin si retailer from wholesaler. Ganon din si manufacturer. Kung si manufacturer nagpautang kay wholesaler, of course si wholesaler mas marami siyang mabibili from manufacturer. Ang effect ng credit, pinapataas niya yung demand and actual consumption. Dahil kung tataas yung demand and actual consumption, ang magiging result dito, tataas ang production. And that is the second economic benefit of credit, the expansion of the purchasing power of the consumers. Let us now proceed to the third economic benefit of credit. The third general benefit of credit is the savings in time and transactional expenses, which make the process in the entire distribution system, from manufacturer to consumers, more convenient and efficient. Yung tinutukoy dito na process in the entire distribution system, from manufacturer to consumers, ay yung transfer ng products or goods from one party to another or from the manufacturer to consumers. Sa pag-grant ng credit or pagbibigay ng credit from one party to another, yung transfer ng goods or products from one party to another ay mas efficient, mas mabilis, mas convenient, less hassle. So as a result, nagkakaroon ng savings in time and transactional expenses. Savings in time and transaction costs will result in higher margins for all the components of the distribution system. Yung tinutukoy dito na higher margins, ang ibig sabihin niyan, higher profits. Of course, dahil merong savings in time at savings in transaction cost, ang effect niyan sa profit ay increase. As a summary, the first economic benefit refers to the manufacturing side. The larger the enterprise, the more economies of scale. The second benefit that credit brings to the economy is the expansion of the purchasing power of the consumers. And the third general benefit of credit is the savings in time and transactional expenses. And that ends the discussion in general functions of credit.